Story 1. Randall Wayne Halfdall Sr. was born on June 17, 1953. He was a white male. He grew up in Texas. His early life was not calm. He started having problems with the law when he was still a teenager. In 1970, when Halfdall was 17 years old, he was arrested for the first time. The charges were misdemeanor theft and shoplifting. This happened in Houston, Texas. That arrest was small, but it was the first step in a pattern of breaking the law. After that, Halfdall continued to make bad choices. In 1975, he was arrested in Tarrant County, Texas. This time the charge was more serious. He was accused of delivering LSD, which is a strong illegal drug. The court gave him a sentence of 10 years. But the judge did not send him to prison right away. Instead, Halfdall received probation. That meant he could stay free as long as he followed the rules and reported to a probation officer. Halfdall did not follow the rules. He stopped reporting to his probation officer. This meant he was now a probation violator. He was also a convicted felon because of the drug charge. That status would follow him for the rest of his life. In 1980, Halfdall was in Richardson, Texas. Police officers were watching a house. They believed the people inside were running a burglary ring. Halfdall was one of those people. He left the house with another man and got into a van. Police stopped the van for a traffic violation. During the stop, officers saw Halfdall trying to push a .38 caliber gun under the seat. He was arrested for unlawful carrying of a weapon. But later, the charges were dropped. The reason was simple. The police could not find Halfdall again to bring him to court. By this time, Halfdall was also using fake names to hide from the law. He called himself Robert Moore. He also used the name Jack Douglas Cone. He dyed his hair to change his appearance. He did these things because he knew he was in trouble for breaking his probation. In 1982, Halfdall was arrested again. This time the charge was aggravated kidnapping. The story was serious. A woman was taken by force from Grand Prairie, Texas. Halfdall and 2 other men took her. They drove her first to Colorado, then to Wyoming. During this time, the woman said she was beaten and gagged. She said her life was threatened. Eventually she escaped and went to the police. Halfdall was arrested and spent 7 days in jail in Grand Prairie. But he was never indicted by a grand jury, so he was not formally charged with a crime. Still, the arrest remained on his record. Around this same time, Halfdall moved to Colorado. He worked at a place called the Bates Farm. But this was not a normal farm. The Bates Farm was a place where people made methamphetamine, which is a dangerous illegal drug. The people there also traded stolen guns and other illegal weapons. Halfdall became an important person at the farm. He was known as the right-hand man and the enforcer. That meant he was the one who made sure people did what they were told. He oversaw the whole drug operation. He sold drugs. He collected money from people who owed debts for drugs. He carried a weapon every single day. Other workers at the farm knew him as someone who was violent and dangerous. Law enforcement officers from Texas and Colorado learned about Halfdall. They said he had a bad reputation for being peaceful and law-abiding. They also said he had a bad reputation for being dangerous and violent. These officers knew Halfdall from their work. They had dealt with him before. Despite all of this, Halfdall also had a softer side. He had a daughter named Colleen. He loved her very much. He remembered looking down at her when she was a baby in a bassinet. He thought of her as an angel. That love for his daughter was real, even though his life was full of crime. By the middle of 1985, Halfdall was a convicted felon who had stopped reporting to his probation officer. He was using fake names. He had dyed his hair. He had been arrested for kidnapping. He had worked as an enforcer for a drug ring. He carried guns regularly. He had a reputation for violence. He was also still using drugs and alcohol. He was not a man who lived a quiet or lawful life. He was someone who ran from the law and who was not afraid to break rules. On November 11th, 1985, Halfdahl was in Texas with two friends. He was driving across the state. He had been drinking alcohol. He had also eaten hallucinogenic mushrooms, which are drugs that change how a person sees and hears things. He was not in a normal state of mind, but he was still driving, and he was still carrying a loaded 9mm semi-automatic pistol. That afternoon, something happened on the road. Halfdahl lost control of his car. The car swerved. It left the highway. It crossed a frontage road. Then it crashed through a wooden fence and came to a stop in the backyard of someone's house. This accident would lead to the next part of the story. But before that next part begins, it is important to remember where Halfdahl came from. He grew up breaking rules. He became a felon. He stopped following his probation. He used fake names. He dyed his hair. He worked for drug dealers. He carried guns. He was arrested for kidnapping. He was known to be violent. And on that November day in 1985, he was drunk and high on mushrooms. That is the man who got out of that crashed car. The car came to a stop in the backyard of a house. It was just after 4 p.m. on November 11th, 1985. Halfdahl was behind the wheel. Two other men were in the car with him. Their names were Sean Terry, who was 22 years old, and Daniel Helgren, who was 24 years old. All three men had been drinking. Halfdahl had also eaten hallucinogenic mushrooms. Halfdahl tried to restart the car. The engine would not start. The car was stuck in the yard. So Halfdahl decided to leave. But before he got out, he opened the glove box. Inside the glove box was a loaded 9mm semi-automatic pistol. He took the gun out. Then he hid it under a jacket he was carrying. He did this because he knew something important. He was a convicted felon. He had stopped reporting to his probation officer. If the police came, they would find the gun and arrest him. He wanted to hide the weapon so no one would see it. Halfdahl got out of the car. He started walking across the backyard. He tried to leave through a gate, but the gate was locked. He could not open it. He was trapped in the yard for a moment. At the same time, a man named James D. Mitchell Jr. was driving home. He was 42 years old. He worked as a sergeant for the Amarillo Police Department. He had just finished his shift. He was still wearing his police uniform. The uniform was blue. Over the uniform, he wore an unzipped windbreaker. On the windbreaker, the words Amarillo City Police were written clearly. There was also a badge insignia on it. Anyone looking at him could see he was a police officer. Mitchell saw the accident happen. He saw Halfdahl's car swerve around his truck. Then he watched the car leave the road and crash through the fence. Officer Mitchell decided to stop. He was off duty, but he was still a police officer. He wanted to help. He pulled his personal vehicle over. Then he walked toward the crashed car. He still had his police revolver with him because he was in uniform. Mitchell entered the backyard through the broken fence. As soon as he stepped into the yard, Halfdahl saw him. Halfdahl later admitted that he saw Mitchell at that moment. But Halfdahl did not stop. Instead, he turned away from Mitchell and tried again to get through the locked gate. He wanted to escape. Officer Mitchell saw Halfdahl running away. He drew his revolver. Then he started chasing Halfdahl across the yard. Mitchell was shouting orders. One eyewitness who was nearby heard Mitchell clearly. Mitchell said, "Hey, halt, halt, stop, police." He was telling Halfdahl to stop because he was a police officer. Halfdahl kept trying to open the gate, but he could not get the latch to work. So he was stuck with his back to the gate. Mitchell kept moving closer. The distance between them became smaller and smaller. Soon Mitchell was about 6 feet away from Halfdahl. Halfdahl made a decision. He turned around to face Mitchell. He still had his 9mm pistol hidden under the jacket, but now he pulled it out. He pointed the gun at Officer Mitchell. Then he fired 4 shots in rapid succession. The first shot hit Mitchell in the wrist. This shot caused Mitchell to drop his revolver. He could no longer use his gun. The second shot hit Mitchell in the abdomen. The third shot went into Mitchell's chest. The fourth shot also went into Mitchell's chest. The third and fourth shots were fatal. They pierced Mitchell's heart and lung. Officer Mitchell fell to the ground. He never fired his revolver, even once. He did not have a chance. Eyewitnesses saw what happened. Sean Terry, one of the passengers in Halfdall's car, saw Halfdall shoot Mitchell 4 times in a row. Another witness in the yard saw the whole event. Other people had stopped their cars on the highway. From that distance, they could still see everything clearly. They could see that Mitchell was wearing a police uniform. They could see Halfdall turn and fire. At least 4 witnesses saw Halfdall turn his head and look directly at Mitchell before he pulled the trigger. Daniel Helgren, the other passenger, was doing something else at the time. He was removing the license plate from the wrecked car. He later said he heard the shots. They were very fast, one after another. After the shooting, Halfdall ran away from the scene. He did not stay to help Officer Mitchell. He left him lying on the ground. Mitchell died from his wounds. He had been a police officer for 20 years. 16 of those years were with the Amarillo Police Department. He left behind a wife and 3 children. His children were ages 20, 9, and 8. He also had a 6-month-old grandson who would never know him. Halfdall fled, but later that same night, he turned himself in to the police. Sean Terry was arrested near the scene of the shooting. Daniel Helgren was arrested later in New Mexico. All 3 men were taken into custody. When police searched the wrecked car, they found several items. There was a bottle of gin and some beer cans. They also found multiple pieces of identification. These IDs had at least 3 different names on them. This matched Halfdall's habit of using fake names like Jack Douglas Cone. That night, Halfdall showed no remorse. He acted arrogant. When police told him why he was being arrested, he claimed not to know. But the evidence was clear. He had shot an officer who was clearly in uniform. He had fired 4 shots. 2 of those shots were fired at close range while the officer was already falling or on the ground. The first shot to the wrist had already disarmed Mitchell. But Halfdall kept shooting. The victims of this crime were not just Officer Mitchell. His family also became victims that day. They lost a husband and a father. They would live with that loss for the rest of their lives. On the night of November 11th, 1985, after Halfdall turned himself in, the police began their investigation. They already had Sean Terry in custody near the scene. Daniel Helgren was arrested later in New Mexico. Officers collected evidence from the crash site. They found the gin bottle, beer cans, and the fake IDs in the car. They also recovered the 9mm pistol that Halfdall had used to shoot Officer Mitchell. The gun was tested. The bullets matched the weapon. The police also talked to witnesses. Many people had seen the events from the highway. One witness was a worker who was only 20 to 25 feet away from the crime scene. That worker heard Mitchell identify himself as a police officer. Other witnesses said they saw Mitchell's uniform clearly. One of Halfdall's own passengers, who was still in the car when Mitchell entered the yard, said he knew Mitchell was an officer the second he saw him. He said, "No doubt in my mind." The police also looked into Halfdall's past. They learned about his probation violation, his arrest for aggravated kidnapping, and his work at the Bates Farm drug operation. This information was used to show that Halfdall had a reason to avoid being caught. If Mitchell had arrested him, Halfdall would have faced serious charges. The case went to trial in the 181st District Court of Randall County, Texas. The trial began in early 1986. Halfdall was charged with capital murder. Under Texas law, killing a police officer who is doing his job is a capital crime. But the law also required that the killer knew the victim was an officer. This became the main issue at trial. Halfdall admitted that he shot Mitchell, but he said he did not know Mitchell was a police officer. He claimed that because of the drugs and alcohol, he thought Mitchell was an angry motorist that he had run off the road. He said he was scared and acted in self-defense. The The prosecution brought forward strong evidence to prove Halfdahl knew. 11 witnesses testified that they recognized Mitchell as a policeman from his uniform. One witness heard Mitchell yell, "Stop, police!" The prosecution also showed that Halfdahl looked at Mitchell before firing. 4 witnesses saw Halfdahl turn and look at the officer. The prosecution called a forensic pathologist named Dr. Ralph Erdman. Dr. Erdman examined the body and the gunshot wounds. He told the jury that only one shot, the one that hit Mitchell's wrist, could have been fired while Mitchell was standing. The other 3 shots, including the 2 fatal chest wounds, were fired while Mitchell was already falling or on the ground. This meant Halfdahl kept shooting after the officer was no longer a threat. The jury listened to all the evidence. On April 4, 1986, they found Halfdahl guilty of capital murder. The next day, April 5, 1986, the same jury heard more evidence to decide if Halfdahl should get the death penalty. The prosecution showed that Halfdahl had a history of violence. They brought 5 law enforcement officers who testified that Halfdahl had a bad reputation for being dangerous. They also told the jury about the kidnapping case and the Bates farm drug operation. The jury then answered the 3 special questions required for a death sentence: whether Halfdahl deliberately killed Mitchell, whether his response to any provocation was unreasonable, and whether he would likely commit violent acts in the future. The answers led to a death sentence. The judge formally sentenced Halfdahl to death on April 7, 1986. After the sentence, Halfdahl began filing appeals. He first appealed to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. That court affirmed his conviction and sentence on June 13, 1990. He asked for a rehearing, but it was denied on December 17, 1990. Then he took his case to the United States Supreme Court. On May 28, 1991, the Supreme Court refused to hear his case. Halfdahl then filed a state habeas corpus application on July 30, 1991. This is a legal request asking the court to review whether his imprisonment was lawful. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied relief on June 1, 1994. He filed another state habeas application on May 22, 1995. That was also denied. On May 25, 1995, Halfdahl filed a petition for a federal writ of habeas corpus. This meant he asked a federal court to review his case. The federal district court denied his petition on December 17, 1999. He appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. On May 15, 2001, the Fifth Circuit denied his requested relief. He asked for a rehearing, but it was denied on June 20, 2001. Halfdahl made one final attempt. On September 18, 2001, he filed a petition for a writ of certiorari with the United States Supreme Court. This was his last chance to have the highest court hear his case. On November 26, 2001, the Supreme Court denied his petition. He had run out of legal options. The court set his execution date for January 31, 2002. When the judge told him the date, Halfdahl said, "Sounds good to me." He was taken to the Huntsville Walls unit, where death row inmates are executed in Texas. On the day of the execution, Halfdahl was allowed a final meal. He requested a chef salad with ranch dressing, a double meat cheeseburger with all the toppings, French fries with ketchup, and a chocolate shake. At 6:02 p.m. on January 31, 2002, Halfdahl was led from his holding cell. He was strapped to a stainless steel gurney. The medical team inserted a needle into a vein. He made a final statement. He told his daughter Colleen that he loved her. He then shouted, "The road goes on forever and the party never ends. Let's rock and roll." He said, "It's on the way, I can feel it." His eyes began to close. He snored softly. He took about 6 deep breaths. Then his breathing stopped. At 6:48 p.m., Randall Wayne Halfdahl Sr. was pronounced dead. He was 48 years old. After the execution, the husband of Mitchell's daughter read a statement. He said the execution could not erase the years of heartache and grief, but he said the family had finally obtained peace. The two other men involved received different sentences. Daniel Helgren was given 1 year of probation for failure to stop and render aid. That was a much lighter sentence because he did not fire the gun. Sean Terry was arrested near the scene, but his specific sentence is not detailed in the records. After Hafdal's trial, the forensic pathologist Dr. Ralph Erdman got into trouble. In other cases, he had given false testimony. He pleaded guilty to perjury and tampering with government records. He lost his medical license and received probation, but his false testimony in Hafdal's case was never overturned. The conviction stood. Officer James D. Mitchell Jr. was buried with honors. His wife, Ellen Mitchell Stone, raised their 2 young daughters without their father. The family attended every court hearing for 16 years. They waited for justice to be done. After the execution, they said they could finally close that painful chapter. Randall Wayne Hafdal Sr., a convicted felon who killed a uniformed police officer to avoid arrest, died by lethal injection on January 31, 2002, and the case of State of Texas versus Hafdal came to a permanent end. Story 2. David Wayne Woodruff was born on November 19, 1959, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. His mother was a housewife. His father worked at a warehouse loading heavy boxes onto trucks. The family lived in a small rented house on the south side of the city. The neighborhood had old houses and cracked sidewalks. David was the second child. He had an older brother named Mark and a younger sister named Lisa. When David was 5 years old, his parents started fighting often. His father drank beer every night after work. Some nights the father yelled. Other nights he broke dishes or punched holes in the walls. David learned to stay quiet when his father was drunk. His mother tried to protect the children, but she was afraid of her husband. This continued for many years. David went to elementary school near his home. His teachers said he was a quiet boy. He did not cause trouble in class, but he also did not do his homework. By 3rd grade, he could read only simple words. The school tested him and said he needed extra help. His parents did not take him to the tutoring sessions. They said the school was lying about their son. When David was 8 years old, his parents divorced. His mother took the 3 children and moved into a small apartment. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and washing dishes at a diner at night. David rarely saw her. He and his brother and sister were often alone. Mark, who was 2 years older, started stealing food from a grocery store because there was not enough to eat at home. David attended middle school but did poorly in every subject. He liked only one thing, drawing. He could sit for hours drawing cars and motorcycles on scrap paper. His art teacher said he had talent. But David stopped taking art class in 7th grade because his mother could not afford the supplies. After that, he spent his free time wandering the streets with older boys from his apartment complex. At age 14, David tried marijuana for the first time. An older boy shared a joint with him behind a dumpster. David liked the feeling. He soon started smoking marijuana almost every day. He also began drinking beer. He got the money by taking things from unlocked cars at night. He never broke a window. He only opened doors that were already unlocked. He told himself this was not really stealing. David dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. He was 16 years old. His mother cried when he told her, but she did not force him to go back. She was too tired to fight with him. David got a job at a car wash. He worked there for 6 months. Then he was fired for showing up drunk. He got another job at a fast food restaurant. He quit after 3 weeks because he did not like being told what to do. Between ages 17 and 20, David held 8 different jobs. Each job ended the same way. He stopped showing up or he was fired for drinking. He lived with friends on their couches. Sometimes he slept in his car. He had a 1978 Chevrolet that barely ran. He kept clothes in the back seat and a sleeping bag in the trunk. At age 20, David met a woman named Tammy at a bar. Tammy was 19 years old and worked at a donut shop. She had blonde hair and a soft voice. David liked her because she did not ask him many questions. They moved into a cheap motel room together. David told Tammy he was looking for a good job. In truth, he was not looking at all. He spent his days drinking beer and watching television while Tammy worked the morning shift at the donut shop. Tammy became pregnant in 1980. David was 21 years old. Their daughter was born in January 1981. David held the baby once, then handed her back to Tammy. He said he did not know how to be a father. He started staying away from the motel for 2 or 3 days at a time. Tammy would not know where he was. When he came back, he smelled of alcohol and sometimes had fresh cuts on his knuckles. In 1982, Tammy left David. She took their daughter and moved to Texas to live with her mother. David did not try to stop her. He did not call her. He did not ask to see his daughter. He later told a friend that the baby was better off without him. That was the last time he ever spoke of having a child. After Tammy left, David moved into a trailer park on the east side of Oklahoma City. His trailer was small and had holes in the floor. He covered the holes with pieces of cardboard. He did not have a refrigerator. He kept food in a cooler with ice he bought every other day. His neighbor in the next trailer was a man named John Romano. Romano was 2 years older than David. Romano had a thin face and quick eyes. He talked fast and laughed loud. He also drank heavily. David and Romano became friends. They drank beer together on Romano's porch most nights. Romano told David stories about stealing jewelry from stores and selling it to pawn shops. Romano said he had never been caught because he was smart. David listened and said nothing. He drank his beer and nodded his head. Romano also introduced David to stronger drugs. Cocaine was Romano's favorite. David tried it and liked it more than marijuana. Soon he was spending money he did not have on cocaine. He sold his car for cash. He borrowed money from Romano. He owed Romano more than $500 by the summer of 1984. David tried to get clean one time. In early 1985, he went to a free clinic and asked for help. A counselor gave him a list of meetings. David went to 2 meetings. Then he stopped going. He told Romano that the meetings were boring and the people there were weak. Romano laughed and gave David a line of cocaine. David took it. By the fall of 1985, David Wayne Woodruff was 25 years old. He had no job. He had no car. He had no contact with his family. He owed money to his only friend. He lived in a broken trailer. He drank every day. He used cocaine when he could get it. He had not spoken to his mother in more than a year. He did not know where his daughter lived. He did not think about the future. He only thought about the next drink and the next high. One night in early October 1985, Romano knocked on David's door. Romano had a serious look on his face. He said he needed to talk about something important. David let him in. They sat down at the small table in David's trailer. Romano began to speak. David lit a cigarette and listened. Romano sat down at the small table in David's trailer. He leaned forward and spoke in a low voice. He said he knew a man named Roger Joel Sarfati. Sarfati was a jeweler. He worked from his apartment in Oklahoma City. Romano said he had met Sarfati a few times and had been inside the apartment. Sarfati kept jewelry there. He also kept large containers full of quarters. Romano believed there was a lot of money in those containers. Romano told David that he needed money. He owed people. He wanted to rob Sarfati. But there was a problem. Sarfati would recognize Romano. If Romano just knocked on the door, Sarfati might let him inside. But then Sarfati would later tell the police who robbed him. Romano said the only way to fix that problem was to kill Sarfati. He said this to David without any emotion in his voice. He looked directly at David's eyes. David did not say yes right away. He drank his beer and thought about it. Romano told David that he would do the killing. David just needed to help with the robbery. Romano promised they could split the jewelry and the quarters. David owed Romano money. Romano said he would forget the debt if David helped. David agreed. Romano then spoke to another person about the plan. That person was a friend named Tracy Greggs. Romano asked Greggs to help him rob Sarfati. Romano again said he would have to kill Sarfati. Greggs did not agree to help. The record does not show that Greggs went to the police at that time. Romano then returned to David as his only partner. The date was Friday, October 11th, 1985. Romano was supposed to be in prison at that time. He was serving a sentence for a previous crime, but the prison had given him a weekend furlough. This meant he was allowed to leave the prison on Friday evening and return on Sunday evening. Romano got out of prison on Friday, October 11th. He went to find David. On the morning of Saturday, October 12th, 1985, David and Romano went to Sarfati's apartment. The exact time was between 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. The police later determined this window based on evidence. Romano knocked on the door. Sarfati knew Romano, so he opened the door. Sarfati was 52 years old. He was a white male. He worked as a jeweler from his home. Once inside, Romano and David attacked Sarfati. The two men bound his hands and feet. They used rope or cord to tie him. Then they beat him about the head. They strangled him. Romano then took a knife and stabbed Sarfati 5 times. The medical examiner later confirmed these injuries. Sarfati died in his own apartment. After Sarfati was dead, Romano and David searched the apartment. They took jewelry. They found the large containers of quarters. The quarters were missing after the murder. The police later learned that Sarfati kept as many as 6 large containers of quarters in his apartment. These were all taken. On Saturday afternoon, October 12th, 1985, Romano and David went to a mall. They were intoxicated from drinking alcohol. They tried to buy a television at a store in the mall. They paid using only quarters. This was unusual because most people do not carry that many quarters. Mall security noticed them. The two men were drunk and acting disorderly. Security took them into custody. When mall security searched Romano, they found a lock blade folding knife. They also saw that Romano was wearing an expensive-looking gold necklace. This necklace likely came from Sarfati's apartment. David and Romano were detained for being drunk and disorderly, but they were not yet connected to the murder. No one had found Sarfati's body yet. The next day was Sunday, October 13th, 1985. David went to see his girlfriend. She noticed that David had a lot of jewelry with him. She knew David had no job and no money. She asked him where he got the jewelry. He told her not to worry about it. She saw that he had rings, necklaces, and other pieces that he could not afford. She did not call the police. That same Sunday, Romano had to return to prison. His weekend furlough ended Sunday evening. He went back to the prison. He did not tell anyone what he had done. He acted like a normal prisoner returning from time off. Sarfati's body was not found right away. He lived alone. No one reported him missing. On Tuesday, October 15th, 1985, a friend went to Sarfati's apartment. The friend knocked. No one answered. The friend became worried and entered the apartment. The friend found Sarfati's body. The friend called the police around 11 p.m. The police arrived and saw the scene. Sarfati was dead. He had been bound, beaten, strangled, and stabbed 5 times. The apartment had been robbed. The jewelry was gone. The quarters were gone. The police began asking questions. They learned that Sarfati knew Romano. They also learned that Romano had been on furlough from prison that weekend. The police put Romano on their list of suspects. But the police did not arrest anyone yet. They needed more evidence. They started watching Romano, and looking for his friend who helped him. On July 19, 1986, 9 months after Sarfati's murder, Romano killed another man. The victim was Lloyd Thompson. Thompson was 63 years old. He was a white male. He was also an acquaintance of Romano. The crime happened during a robbery in Oklahoma City. Romano killed Thompson. David was involved in this murder as well. The two men were later charged and tried for Thompson's death. But that case came after the Sarfati investigation had already begun. For 10 months after Sarfati's death, David was not arrested. He kept the jewelry hidden. He did not tell anyone what happened. He continued drinking and using cocaine. He thought he had gotten away with it. After the friend found Roger Sarfati's body on October 15, 1985, the Oklahoma City police began their investigation. They photographed the apartment and collected evidence. They found rope fibers on Sarfati's wrists and ankles. They found no fingerprints left behind by the killers. The medical examiner completed an autopsy and confirmed the cause of death was strangulation combined with 5 stab wounds. The police interviewed Sarfati's neighbors and friends. Several people told the police that Sarfati knew a man named John Romano. The police checked Romano's record. They learned he was a convicted criminal who had been in prison at the time of the murder. But they also learned that Romano had been given a weekend furlough from Friday, October 11th through Sunday, October 13th, 1985. This meant Romano was free on Saturday, October 12th, when the murder occurred. The police wanted to question Romano, but Romano had returned to prison. They went to the prison and spoke with him. Romano said he did not know anything about Sarfati's death. He said he had spent his furlough drinking with a friend named David Woodruff. The police wrote down David's name. The police then went to David's trailer. David was not there. A neighbor said David had not been seen for several days. The police checked David's record. He had arrests for public intoxication and petty theft, but no major crimes. They decided to keep watching for him. Over the next several months, the police continued gathering information. They spoke to the mall security officers who had detained Romano and David on October 12, 1985, the day of the murder. The security officers provided a report. The report stated that the two men had been drunk, had tried to buy a television with quarters, and that Romano had a lock blade knife and an expensive gold necklace. The police now had a link between Romano, David, and stolen property on the same day Sarfati was killed. The police also spoke to David's girlfriend. She told them that on Sunday, October 13, 1985, David had shown her a large amount of jewelry. She said he could not afford such items. She described some of the pieces. The police compared her description to photographs of jewelry that Sarfati's family said were missing. There were matches. 10 months passed. David Woodruff had not been arrested because the police could not find him. He had left Oklahoma City and stayed with friends in other towns. In August 1986, a tip came in. A person who knew David called the police and gave an address in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The police went to that address and found David sleeping on a couch. The police arrested David on August 16, 1986. They took him to the Tulsa County Jail. Then they transferred him to Oklahoma City. When David was arrested, he asked the police if he could make a phone call. The police allowed him one call. David called his girlfriend. On that phone call, he told her to go to his house and clear the house. The police heard him say this. They understood that he meant she should remove any evidence. The police then went to David's trailer with a search warrant. They found several pieces of jewelry hidden in a shoe box under the bed. The jewelry was later identified as belonging to Roger Sarfati. John Romano was already in prison on other charges by this time. The police interviewed him again. Romano did not confess, but they had enough evidence to charge both men. The state of Oklahoma decided to try David Woodruff and John Romano together for the murder of Roger Sarfati. The trial took place in 1987. The jury heard testimony from multiple witnesses: the friend who found the body, the mall security officers, David's girlfriend, and the police who searched David's trailer. The prosecutors showed the jewelry found in David's trailer and the gold necklace Romano had worn at the mall. They also presented evidence that David and Romano had no alibi for the time window between 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. on October 12, 1985. The defense lawyers for David argued that Romano had done the killing alone and that David was just present. But the evidence showed both men had been involved in the robbery. Under Oklahoma law, if a person takes part in a robbery and someone is killed during that robbery, all participants can be convicted of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for several hours. They found David Wayne Woodruff guilty of first-degree malice murder. They also found him guilty of robbery with a dangerous weapon. The date of the sentence was June 15, 1987. After the guilty verdict, the same jury heard evidence to decide whether David should receive the death penalty. The prosecutors told the jury about the second murder. They said that on July 19, 1986, David and Romano had killed Lloyd Thompson. The prosecutors presented the Thompson case to show that David had killed before. The jury was convinced. They sentenced David Wayne Woodruff to death. David appealed his conviction and death sentence. His lawyers argued that mistakes were made during the trial. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed the case. In 1993, the court upheld the conviction and death sentence for the Sarfati murder. David then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. The Supreme Court denied his request in 1993. There was a separate legal issue with the Thompson murder conviction. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals overturned the original Thompson convictions because the trial court had made an error by trying both men together for that crime. The state retried David for the murder of Lloyd Thompson. A new jury convicted him again, but this time the jury did not sentence him to death. For the Thompson murder, David received life in prison without the possibility of parole. This did not change his death sentence for the Sarfati murder. David continued filing appeals for the next several years. Each appeal was denied. In late 2001, the Oklahoma Attorney General asked the court to set an execution date. The court set January 31, 2002. On January 31, 2002, David Wayne Woodruff was taken to the execution chamber at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. He was offered a last meal. He chose 2 cheeseburgers, fried potatoes, and a lemon-lime slushie. He ate the meal. Then he was strapped to a gurney. A prison official read the death warrant. David was asked if he had any final words. David said, "We're not here for a social event. We're here for a killing. Name's David Wayne Woodruff. Let's get this show on the road." The lethal injection was administered. David Wayne Woodruff was pronounced dead at the age of 42. He was the 758th person executed in the United States since 1976, and the 50th person executed in Oklahoma since that year. Roger Sarfati's family attended the execution. They said afterward that the closure did not bring Roger back, but they were glad the case was over. John Romano was executed 2 days before David, on January 29, 2002, for the same murder. The 2 men died within 48 hours of each other. The case of Roger Joel Sarfati was closed. Story 3. Michael Owsley was born on May 7, 1961. He was born in Kansas City, Missouri. His mother was a young woman who had problems with alcohol. Before Michael was born, his mother tried to end her pregnancy. She did not go to a doctor. Instead, she used home remedies. She would sit for hours over a bucket filled with hot water and turpentine. Turpentine is a strong chemical used to clean paint. She believed this would make her lose the baby. But the baby survived. Michael was born alive. Michael's mother continued to drink alcohol after he was born. She was an alcoholic. This means she could not stop drinking even when it caused problems. Because of her drinking, she could not take good care of Michael. His family did not have much money. They were poor. Michael grew up in neighborhoods where many people struggled to find jobs and pay for food. As a child, Michael did not have a stable home life. His mother's drinking made things unpredictable. Some days she was present. Other days she was not able to care for him. Michael did not have a father mentioned in records. He was raised mostly by his mother, even though she had her own struggles. Michael went to school in Kansas City. He did not do well in school. He had trouble paying attention. He also had trouble following rules. Teachers saw him as a difficult student. He did not finish high school with good grades. Eventually, he left school before graduating. He did not get a diploma. As a young man, Michael could not find good jobs. He worked small jobs here and there. He did not have a career or steady work. He did not learn a trade. Without a high school diploma, most jobs paid very little money. He often did not have enough money to pay for a place to live or for food. Michael started using drugs and alcohol when he was a teenager. He drank alcohol often. He also used a drug called PCP. PCP is a strong drug that can make a person feel disconnected from reality. People on PCP can become confused, angry, or violent. Michael used PCP many times. He also drank gin, which is a strong alcoholic drink. His drug and alcohol use became a habit. He used almost every day. Michael also had trouble with the law when he was young. Before the main crime in this story, he had been in trouble for smaller offenses. He did not have a long list of serious crimes, but he was not a person who followed the law. He spent time with other people who used drugs and carried weapons. He did not have many friends who stayed out of trouble. Michael was black. In his neighborhood, many black families were poor. Michael saw that rich people and white people had more chances than he did. He felt that the system was not fair to him. He believed that because he was poor and black, people did not care about him. He carried this feeling with him as he got older. By the time Michael was in his early 30s, he had no steady job, no wife, and no children that records show. He lived day to day. He used drugs to escape his problems. He drank alcohol to feel numb. He did not go to church regularly, although later in life he would speak about Allah. But in his early years, he had no strong religious beliefs. One of the people Michael knew was a man named Marion Hamilton. They were not family, but they knew each other from the streets. Both of them used drugs. Both of them carried guns. Both of them were looking for money. Michael and Hamilton spent time together. They talked about getting money quickly. They did not want to work regular jobs. They thought about taking money from other people who sold drugs. Michael was angry at the world. He felt that life had given him nothing. He did not trust police. He did not trust courts. He believed that no one would help him. So he decided to help himself, even if that meant hurting other people. He did not plan out his whole future. He just lived one day at a time. But inside him, there was a growing willingness to use violence. On most days in early 1993, Michael was using PCP and drinking gin. He would wake up late. He would look for money to buy more drugs. He would carry his shotgun with him. He did not have a legal reason to carry it. He kept it because he wanted to feel powerful. He wanted to be ready in case someone tried to take something from him. Michael knew that people sold drugs for money. He knew that some of those people carried cash with them after a sale. He and Hamilton began watching other drug dealers. They were looking for an easy target. They wanted to take money without doing too much work. They did not have a full plan yet, but they were ready to act when the right moment came. That moment would come on a day in April 1993. But that is the next part of the story. On April 18, 1993, a young man named Elvin Iverson made a plan. Elvin was 18 years old. He lived in Kansas City, Missouri. He sold drugs to make money. That day, he decided to drive to another city to sell drugs. That city was Junction City, Kansas. It is about 120 miles west of Kansas City. Elvin did not go alone. He took a woman with him. Her name was Ellen Cole. She was not his girlfriend. She was a companion. She knew about the drug sale. She agreed to go with him. Elvin drove his car from Kansas City to Junction City. When they arrived, Elvin met with a person who wanted to buy drugs. The sale happened. Elvin received money from the sale. He then gave that money to another person who was with him in Junction City. This was someone else, not Ellen. Elvin did not keep the money on him. He handed it to this other person for safekeeping or for another reason. After the sale was done, Elvin and Ellen got back in the car. Elvin drove back to Kansas City. He drove to the house where he was staying. That house was in Kansas City, Missouri. It was his residence at the time. When Elvin and Ellen arrived at the house and got out of the car, two men were waiting for them. One was Michael Owsley. The other was Marion Hamilton. Michael and Hamilton had been watching. They knew Elvin was selling drugs. They wanted to take the money from him. Michael had a 12-gauge shotgun. The barrel had been sawed off to make it shorter and easier to hide. Hamilton had a Tech 9 semi-automatic weapon. This is a type of gun that fires many bullets quickly. His gun also had a silencer attached. A silencer makes the gunshot quieter. Michael and Hamilton walked up to Elvin and Ellen. They pointed the guns at them. Michael or Hamilton told them to lie down on the ground. Elvin and Ellen saw the weapons. They were afraid. They got down on the floor. Hamilton then asked a question. He wanted to know where the drug money was. He demanded that Elvin tell him. Elvin was scared. He tried to explain. He said he did not have the money. He said he had given the money to another person who was with him in Junction City. Elvin was telling the truth. He no longer had the cash. Hamilton did not believe him. He kept asking. Elvin kept saying he did not have it. Then Michael Owsley spoke to Elvin. Michael called him a bad name. He said, "You're begging for your life now." Then Michael started hitting Elvin. He punched Elvin with his fists. He kicked Elvin with his boots. He also took his shotgun and hit Elvin across the face with the metal barrel. He did this many times. Elvin's face was hurt. He was bleeding. Elvin cried. He kept saying he did not have the money. He was telling the truth again and again. But Michael did not stop. He took a bag from Hamilton. Then he put the bag over Elvin's head. He started to smother Elvin with the bag. Smothering means covering the nose and mouth so the person cannot breathe. While Michael was doing this to Elvin, Hamilton turned to Ellen Cole. Hamilton asked her where the money was. Ellen was also very scared. She did not know where the money was. But she was afraid that if she said she did not know, they would hurt her too. So she lied. She said she could take them to a key. A key might mean a place where drugs or money were hidden. She did not actually have a key. She just wanted to stay alive. Hamilton then found an electrical extension cord. This is a long wire used to plug in appliances. He used the cord to tie Elvin and Ellen together. He tied them by their feet. They could not run away. Then he took a blanket and covered both of them with it. Michael Owsley stood over them. He hit them again with the barrel of the shotgun. While he hit them, he said these words, "One of you will live. One of you will die." Then he put the gun to Elvin Iverson's head. He was ready to pull the trigger. But before he fired, Hamilton said something. Hamilton told Michael to put a pillow over Elvin's head first. Hamilton said this because a pillow would muffle the sound of the gunshot. Even though Hamilton already had a silencer on his own gun, Michael's shotgun did not have a silencer. The pillow would make the blast quieter. Michael did what Hamilton said. He took a pillow. He placed it over Elvin's head. Then he put the shotgun against the pillow, still aimed at Elvin's head. He pulled the trigger. The shotgun blast went through the pillow and into Elvin Iverson's head. The shot killed Elvin instantly. He died right there on the floor. He was 18 years old. After the shooting, Hamilton untied Ellen Cole. He did not want to leave her there. He took her to his car. He made her get in. Meanwhile, Michael Owsley got into a second car. Hamilton drove away with Ellen in his car. Michael followed behind in his own car. They were leaving the scene of the murder. But Ellen was not willing to stay with them. A short time after Hamilton started driving, Ellen saw a chance. She managed to escape from Hamilton's car. She got out and ran. She found a phone or a person who could call for help. She told the police what had happened. She gave them the location of the house where Elvin's body was. She told them about Michael Owsley and Marion Hamilton. That night, no police had yet arrested anyone. But the police now knew a crime had happened. They knew the name of one suspect, Michael Owsley. And they knew there was a second suspect, Marion Hamilton. The investigation would begin very soon. After Ellen Cole escaped from Marion Hamilton's car, she ran to safety. She found a telephone or a person who could call the police. She told the officers everything that had happened. She gave them the address of the house where Elvin Iverson was killed. She also gave them the names of the two men, Michael Owsley and Marion Hamilton. Police went to the house. They found Elvin Iverson's body on the floor. He had been shot in the head. A pillow was nearby. A shotgun was found. Police collected the evidence. They took photographs. They wrote down what they saw. The next day, on April 19th, 1993, police arrested Michael Owsley. He was taken into custody. He could not leave. Marion Hamilton was also arrested later. On April 30th, 1993, a grand jury issued an indictment. This is a formal charge. Michael Owsley was charged with first-degree murder, first-degree assault, kidnapping, and armed criminal action. First-degree murder means the killing was planned or done with deliberate intent. The case went to trial in Jackson County Circuit Court. The trial began on October 18th, 1994. The prosecutor presented evidence. The main witness was Ellen Cole. She told the jury what she saw and heard. She described how Owsley hit Elvin with the shotgun, how he said, "One of you will live, one of you will die," how he put a pillow over Elvin's head, and how he fired the gun. Police also showed the shotgun and the pillow. Medical experts explained that the shotgun blast caused instant death. Michael Owsley's lawyer tried to defend him. The lawyer said Owsley was very high on PCP and gin that night. The lawyer argued that Owsley could not form a deliberate intent to kill because the drugs made him confused and violent without planning. A doctor named Dr. Roswell Evans testified that people on PCP can become incredibly violent and do unplanned things. But the prosecutor argued that the evidence showed Owsley acted with purpose. He brought a shotgun. He hit Elvin while asking for money. He put a pillow over the head before shooting. That showed he knew what he was doing. The jury listened to both sides. On October 26, 1994, the jury found Michael Owsley guilty. He was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and 2 counts of armed criminal action. The jury then had to decide the punishment. On October 28, 1994, the jury recommended the death penalty for the murder charge. On January 6, 1995, the judge formally sentenced Michael Owsley. For first-degree murder, he received the death penalty. For kidnapping, he received life in prison. For the 2 armed criminal action charges, he received 2 terms of 15 years each. These sentences would run at the same time as the death sentence, but the death sentence was the main punishment. After the sentence, Michael Owsley did not give up. He had the right to appeal. An appeal means asking a higher court to review the case for mistakes. On January 15, 1995, he filed a notice of appeal. He also filed a motion for post-conviction relief on July 9, 1995. This motion asked the court to overturn the conviction because of problems with his lawyer or with the trial. On July 9, 1996, the circuit court denied his motion for post-conviction relief. The court said there were no legal errors that would change the verdict. Owsley then appealed to the Missouri State Supreme Court. That court is the highest court in the state. On December 23, 1997, the Missouri Supreme Court affirmed the conviction and the death sentence. Affirmed means they agreed with the lower court. They also agreed that the denial of post-conviction relief was correct. Next, Owsley asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. On October 5, 1998, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review it. This meant the lower decisions stayed in place. On December 8, 1998, Owsley filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Missouri. A habeas corpus petition asks a federal court to review whether a person is being held in prison illegally. On May 6, 1999, the U.S. District Court denied the petition. Owsley then appealed to the U.S. 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. On December 11, 2000, the 8th Circuit affirmed the denial of relief. One judge, Judge Heaney, disagreed. He wrote that Owsley should have been allowed to introduce more evidence about his drug use to show he could not deliberate. But the majority of the judges did not agree. On October 1, 2001, the U.S. Supreme Court again declined to review the case. All appeals were finished. The state of Missouri asked the Missouri Supreme Court to set an execution date. On July 7, 2001, the court set the date for February 6, 2002. In the days leading up to the execution, Owsley asked the governor and the U.S. Supreme Court to stop it. He argued that his trial lawyer did a bad job. He said his co-defendant Marion Hamilton got only 20 years for second-degree murder, but he got death. He said the system was unfair to poor black men. On February 5, 2002, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to halt the execution. Governor Bob Holden also refused to stop it. On February 6, 2002, at 12:07 a.m., Michael Owsley was executed by lethal injection at the Potosi Correctional Center in Potosi, Missouri. His last meal was steak, jumbo shrimp, and cheesecake. His final words were, "I hope for salvation. I hope that the mercy and forgiveness that I have asked for will suffice." Praise Allah. He was 40 years old. Marion Hamilton, the accomplice, was not sentenced to death. He was convicted of second-degree murder and received 20 years in prison. He became eligible for parole in April 2003. Elvin Iverson, the victim, was 18 years old when he was killed. He died because two men wanted drug money that he did not even have. Ellen Cole, the witness, survived. Her escape and her decision to call the police made it possible to catch Michael Owsley and Marion Hamilton. No one from Elvin Iverson's family watched the execution. Michael Owsley asked that his own family not come, so none of his relatives were there either. That night in April 1993, a young man sold drugs, drove home, and was shot dead on the floor of his own house by a man who wanted money that was never there. Michael Owsley was put to death for that murder, and Elvin Iverson's life ended at 18, never to return. Story 4. John William Byrd, Jr. was born on December 18, 1963. He was a white male. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. His mother was named Mary Ray. He had a sister named Kim Hamer. Kim was 4 years younger than John. When they were children, they played together in the yard of their Cincinnati home. They built forts from snow and had snowball fights. After playing outside, they would come inside to warm up. Their mother gave them tomato soup. John taught his sister Kim how to ride a bicycle. He also taught her how to write her name. Kim looked up to her brother. She followed him around and wanted to be like him. When John was 12 years old, something important happened. A first grader fell through ice. John saw the boy in danger. He went into the cold water to help the boy. John pulled the first grader to safety. During the rescue, John's hands became frostbitten. The frostbite was so bad that large blisters formed on his hands. He almost lost his hands because of the cold. A local newspaper wrote an article about the rescue. The article was dated January 15th, 1975. A photograph appeared with the article. The photo showed John Bird smiling. He was standing next to a classmate. A police sergeant and their school principal gave them a commendation for saving the boy. John's family loved him. His uncle, Delbert Ray Burton, said John was like a brother to him, even though John was 4 years younger. The uncle said John was a wonderful and beautiful kid. He said John taught him things and made his heart stronger. John enjoyed drawing. He made a color drawing for his mother when he was young. He kept that drawing for many years. He also wrote poetry later in his life. John grew up as a normal child. He had friends. He went to school. By the time he was a teenager, he had a girlfriend. He continued to live in the Cincinnati area. His family stayed close to him. When John was 19 years old, he was still living near his family. He spent time with his sister and his mother. He had not yet been in serious trouble with the law, though he would later have felony convictions as a young adult. But in the spring of 1983, his life was about to change in a way no one in his family expected. On the night of April 17th, 1983, 3 men were together in a red van. Their names were John William Bird, Jr., John Esel Brewer, and William Danny Woodall. Bird was 19 years old. Brewer was 20. Woodall was 34. Woodall was the driver of the van. The 3 men planned to rob stores. They drove to a convenience store called King Quick. The store was located at 9870 Pippin Road in Hamilton County, Ohio. The store was in a suburban area near Cincinnati. The clerk working at King Quick that night was a man named Monty Tewksbury. He was 40 years old. He was married and had 3 children. He worked at the store as a second job. His regular job was at Procter & Gamble. He was working the night shift alone at the King Quick. At approximately 11 p.m., 2 of the men got out of the van. They put on masks. The masks were made of stockings. One of the 2 men carried a knife. It was a Bowie knife with a 5-inch blade. The 2 masked men entered the King Quick store. Monty Tewksbury saw them come in. He did not fight. He put his hands up. He turned his back to the robbers. He did what they told him to do because he wanted to stay safe. The robbers went to the cash register. They opened it. They took out all the money. The total amount was $133.97. They also took Monty's personal belongings. They took his pulsar watch. They took his wedding ring off his finger. They took his wallet. Inside his wallet there was cash, credit cards, and a paper that showed the registration for his car. After taking the money and the personal items, one of the robbers used the Bowie knife. He pushed the knife into Monty's side. The blade went in all the way to the handle, which is called the hilt. The knife cut Monty's liver. The wound caused massive bleeding inside his body. Monty was standing with his hands raised and his back to the robbers when the knife went in. He did not see it coming. Later he would say, "Thank God, he did not see it coming." He did not understand why he was stabbed because he had been cooperative and had given them everything they asked for. The 2 robbers then ripped the telephone out of the wall inside the store. They did this so Monty could not call for help right away. Then they ran out of the store and got back into the red van. A man was driving north on Pippin Road at about 11:10 p.m. He saw 2 men run from the King Quick store. They got into a large red van. The van was parked at the corner of Pippin Road and Birth Brook. The van then drove away. Monty Tewksbury was badly hurt, but he was still alive. He managed to get outside the store. There was a telephone outside. He called his wife, Sharon Tewksbury. He told her he had been robbed and hurt. He said she should call the police and an ambulance. At that same time, a customer arrived at the King Quick store. The customer found Monty standing outside. Monty was leaning against the wall next to the telephone. He was bleeding from his side. The customer helped Monty back inside the store. Then the customer went back to the telephone, which was still off the hook. The customer spoke briefly to Sharon Tewksbury. He also told her to call an ambulance. Then the customer called the police himself. Monty told the customer, "I'm going to die." He said he had been robbed and cut with a knife. He described the robbers as two white men wearing stocking masks. Sharon Tewksbury arrived at the store. She held her dying husband in her arms. He repeated what had happened to him. Police and medical help arrived. Monty was put into an ambulance to go to the hospital. While he was in the ambulance, he said several times that he did not understand why he had been stabbed. He said he had been cooperative. He gave the robbers everything they asked for. He also said, "Thank God I didn't see it coming." As soon as he was taken to the emergency room, his heart stopped. Doctors tried very hard to save his life, but the bleeding was too severe. Monty Tewksbury died at 1:15 a.m. on April 18, 1983. The cause of death was loss of blood from the stab wound to his liver. Now it is important to explain what the three men did after leaving the King quick. They did not stop. A short time after the first robbery, they drove to another store. This store was a Utotem. It was located nearby. Inside the Utotem, a clerk was standing at the cash register. A customer was playing a video game near the front door. Two masked robbers entered the store. One of them carried a knife. The clerk saw what was happening. He ran to a room in the back of the store. The robber with the knife chased after him. The robber tried to force the door open, but he could not get in. Meanwhile, the other robber pushed the customer when the customer tried to leave. The customer managed to dodge past him and got outside. The robbers could not open the cash register, so they took the whole cash register with them. They ran out of the store. A person who lived in an apartment near the Utotem heard a loud muffler noise from a vehicle. He looked outside. He saw two people getting into a large red van. The van was parked in the Utotem parking lot. He noticed that the van had a broken tail light. The red van then drove away from the Utotem. Inside the van were William Danny Woodall driving, John William Bird, Jr., and John Easel Brewer. The cash register from the second robbery was in the back of the van. That is what happened during the crimes on April 17th and early April 18th, 1983. The three men had committed 2 robberies and a murder. Shortly after 1 a.m. on April 18th, 1983, 2 police officers from Forest Park, Ohio were sitting in a marked police car. They were eating their lunch in a Kmart parking lot. The area had many stores, and some had been burglarized recently. About 45 minutes earlier, their supervisor had told them about the robbery at the King Quick store. The officers saw a red cargo van drive by slowly. The van pulled into the Kmart lot and turned off its headlights. A few minutes later, the headlights came back on and the van left. But within 5 minutes, the van returned from the opposite direction. It was still moving slowly. The officers became suspicious. They followed the van. They called their dispatcher and learned who owned the van. The van pulled into a parking lot next to a closed United Dairy Farmers store. The officers pulled behind the van and called for backup. One passenger got out of the van and walked toward the police car. This was John Easel Brewer. He gave a false name, David Urey. He said he had no identification. He gave inconsistent stories about why he was in the area. An officer asked Brewer to stay in the police cruiser while another officer approached the van. The driver was William Danny Woodall. The other passenger was John William Bird, Jr. They gave the officer their identification. The dispatcher said there were no current warrants for them, but both had prior felony convictions. The officer shone a flashlight inside the van. He saw coins on the floor. On a tray on the dashboard, there were stocking masks and a knife. On the floor under a passenger seat, there was a Shell credit card. The name on the card was Sharon Tewksbury, Monty Tewksbury's wife. There was what looked like fresh blood on the inside of the driver's seat. In the back of the van, there was a cash register drawer. The officers arrested all three men. The investigation then moved forward. The police collected physical evidence. A shoe print was found on the counter of the King Quick store. That shoe print matched John Brewer's shoe. Brewer had vaulted over the counter where the cash register and Monty Tewksbury were located. At the time of arrest, Bird had only $1 and some change on him. Brewer had a large amount of money in small bills in his pockets. Sharon Tewksbury's credit card and the registration slip for one of the Tewksbury vehicles were found under Brewer's seat. Bird was charged with aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and abduction. The prosecutors argued that Bird was the one who stabbed Monty Tewksbury. The main evidence against Bird came from a jailhouse informant named Ronald Armstead. Armstead was a career criminal. He claimed that while they were all in the Hamilton County Jail, Bird confessed to him that he had done the stabbing. Armstead said he did not have a deal with prosecutors and had no pending cases. In reality, Armstead had a parole violation that could have sent him back to prison for a long time. The prosecutors did not tell the jury about his full criminal record or his motivation to testify. Another informant, Virgil Jordan, also gave testimony. Jordan had a history of working as a snitch for police. He had even gone undercover for a drug unit. His own brother and sister later said he was a liar who would say anything to get out of legal trouble. The trial took place in Hamilton County Common Pleas Court. On August 16, 1983, the jury found John William Bird, Jr. guilty of aggravated murder and other charges. He was sentenced to death. John Brewer was also convicted, but received a life sentence, not death. William Danny Woodall, the driver, also received a prison sentence. Bird appealed his conviction. The First District Court of Appeals denied his appeal on February 5, 1986. The Ohio Supreme Court denied his appeal on August 12, 1987. He then filed a petition for post-conviction relief. That petition was denied, then reversed on appeal, then denied again. The courts kept rejecting his claims. In 1994, Bird came within 45 minutes of being executed in the electric chair. A federal court stopped it at the last moment to allow more appeals. Over the years, John Brewer signed sworn affidavits saying that he, not Bird, had stabbed Monty Tewksbury. Brewer said this as early as 1989 and again in later years. Prosecutors and courts did not find Brewer's statements credible. They said Brewer was already serving a life sentence and could not be tried again, so he had nothing to lose by lying to help Bird. Bird's lawyers also presented evidence from other inmates who said Ronald Armstead had lied. They said Armstead and Bird were never in a position to have the conversation Armstead described. But the courts discounted those statements because they came from criminals. On January 8, 2001, the United States Supreme Court dismissed Bird's petition for certiorari. That meant his federal appeals were exhausted. Then, on September 12, 2001, Bird was scheduled to be executed. But a federal appeals court granted a stay and ordered a hearing on his claim of actual innocence. A federal magistrate, Michael R. Mers, held a hearing in October 2001. He found that Bird had not presented credible evidence of his innocence. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. Bird had originally chosen the electric chair as his method of execution. He said he wanted to protest the brutality of the death penalty. But in November 2001, Ohio Governor Bob Taft signed a law banning the electric chair. Lethal injection became the only method of execution in Ohio. On February 16, 2002, Governor Taft denied Bird's clemency request. Taft said Bird's letter showed no acceptance of responsibility or remorse. On February 19, 2002, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to stop the execution. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals also rejected a last-minute request that same morning. John William Bird, Jr. was executed by lethal injection at 10:09 a.m. on February 19, 2002, at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, Ohio. He was 38 years old. He had spent 19 years on death row. His last words included telling his family he loved them and saying, "The corruption of the state shall fall." Monty Tewksbury's widow, Sharon, did not attend the execution. She said she would not celebrate John Bird's death. She said she hoped the justice they had been looking for might finally happen. The Tewksbury family had lived with fear and grief for nearly 19 years. Even after the execution, Sharon said she would not relax for a while because she worried about retaliation from Bird's friends. John Bird's mother and sister continued to believe he was innocent. They promised to keep fighting to prove the truth. But the state of Ohio had carried out its sentence. The story of John William Bird, Jr. ends with his death by lethal injection on February 19, 2002, while the family of Monty Tewksbury was left to carry their loss for the rest of their lives. Story 5. Monty Allen Delk was born on February 24, 1967. He was a white male. Not much information is available to the public about his parents or his early childhood years. But by the time he became a young man, his behavior started to show serious problems. As a young adult, Monty got married. His wife's name was Tina. Their marriage was not normal or peaceful. Monty routinely beat his wife. He used physical violence against her on a regular basis. Tina was afraid of him. Monty did not stop at hurting his wife. He also encouraged her to commit crimes with him. He wanted her to join him in his plans. Monty had a habit of looking through newspaper ads. He would search for ads selling valuable items like diamond rings or other expensive things. When he found an ad that interested him, he would make a plan. His plan was always the same. He and Tina would go to the seller's house. They would pretend to be a married couple interested in buying the item. Once inside, Monty planned to hold the sellers at gunpoint. He would tie them up. Then he would take all their valuables. After that, he planned to shoot them in the head and leave. This was not just a thought. Tina later confirmed that Monty talked about these plans seriously. Monty also made threats to many people. He threatened a fellow employee at a lumber mill where he worked. He threatened a pregnant coworker at a Pizza Hut where he also worked. He threatened his own mother-in-law. His mother-in-law came to take her daughter Tina away because she was afraid for Tina's safety. Monty did not like that. He reacted with more threats. Monty told both his wife and other people that he had already killed a man in Florida. He said he had killed someone there. This claim was never proven true by police. But Monty still talked about it as if it were a fact. No charges were ever filed against him for that death. However, Florida authorities later considered him their main suspect in the disappearance and death of a 19-year-old man named William W. Richardson, who went missing in March 1985 and whose remains were found in September 1986 with a gunshot wound to the head. After Tina left him, Monty did not calm down. He threatened his wife's former employer. He wanted to know where Tina was, and he was angry that the employer would not tell him. He said he would find her no matter where she went. In the months before November 1986, Monty's life got worse. He was living in a rooming house in Crockett, Texas. He did not have stable housing. Then he was evicted from that rooming house. He lost his place to live. Around the same time, he lost his Volkswagen in a poker game. He gambled the car away to another person. So by late November 1986, Monty Delk had no home and no car. He had a history of violence against his wife. He had made many threats to kill. He had planned robberies and murders. He had told people he had already killed someone in Florida. He was angry, unstable, and willing to hurt others. He also owned a shotgun. In the month before November 1986, he bought that shotgun and then sawed off part of the barrel to make it shorter and easier to hide. That was the state of Monty Delk's life. Violent thoughts, violent plans, a lost home, a lost car, a sawed-off shotgun, and no money. On Friday, November 28th, 1986, Monty Delk picked up a newspaper. It was the Houston County Courier. He looked through the classified ads, just like he used to do when he planned robberies with his wife. One ad caught his eye. It said that someone was selling a Chevrolet Camaro. Monty did not have a car. He had lost his Volkswagen in a poker game. He also did not have money, but he called the phone number in the ad anyway. The person who answered was a woman named Sheila Allen. Monty spoke to her on the phone. He told her he was calling from a pay phone. He said he did not have a ride. He asked her to bring the Camaro to a specific place. He told her to bring it to the parking lot of Brookshire's grocery store in Crockett, Texas. He said he wanted to test drive the car. Sheila agreed. She noted that part of his name was Allen, which was the same as her last name. Monty did not tell her that he had just been evicted from a rooming house only 1.5 blocks away from that grocery store. He also did not tell her that the rooming house residents had to use a pay phone across the street. The owner of the Camaro was Sheila's husband. His name was Gene Olin Allen, too. Everyone called him Bubba. Bubba was 22 years old. He was a white male. He and his wife had placed the ad to sell their car. The next morning, Saturday, November 29th, 1986, Bubba Allen got up early. He cleaned the Camaro and washed it. Then he drove to the Brookshire's parking lot in Crockett to meet Monty Delk. When Bubba arrived, Monty was there waiting. They met face to face. Monty got into the driver's seat. Bubba got into the passenger seat. They went for a test drive. At some point during that drive, Monty took out the sawed-off shotgun he had bought and modified a month earlier. He pointed the shotgun at Bubba Allen. He pulled the trigger. The shotgun fired once. The bullet hit Bubba above and behind his left ear. The wound was fatal. Bubba died either right away or very quickly. After Bubba was dead, Monty took Bubba's wallet. Inside the wallet there was money, including at least one $100 bill. There was also a payroll check. There was a photograph of Bubba's wife, Sheila Allen. Monty kept that photo for himself. He also kept the copy of the newspaper ad that had listed the Camaro for sale. He put both items into his own wallet. Then Monty stopped the car. He got out. He dragged Bubba's body out of the passenger seat. He left the body in a ditch beside a remote stretch of road. This location was about 3 miles south of Palestine, in Anderson County, Texas. The road was not busy. The ditch was hidden from plain view. Monty got back into the Camaro. He drove away. He was now the one in control of Bubba's car. At 1 p.m. that same day, a neighbor who lived about 100 yards down the road from the ditch heard a single gunshot. That was the sound of Monty killing Bubba Allen. Shortly before 1:30 p.m., someone found Bubba's body. The body was lying in the ditch. It was limp. Blood was still oozing from the wound behind his left ear. His wallet was gone. Between 1:30 p.m. and 2 p.m., a woman who knew Bubba saw the Camaro driving on a road about 28 miles south of Palestine. The car was heading toward Crockett. She looked inside. She saw only one person driving. It was not Bubba. It was a man she did not recognize. That man was Monty Delk. At about 5:30 p.m., Monty arrived in Jasper, Texas. He found a friend or acquaintance named Philip Johnson. Monty talked Philip into coming with him. He said they should go to New Orleans, Louisiana. Philip agreed to go. Philip got into the Camaro with Monty. While they drove, Philip noticed two things. First, he saw a sawed-off shotgun sitting inside the car. Second, he noticed that Monty had a lot of cash with him. That was unusual for Monty, who had been broke. At first, Monty lied to Philip. He said he was buying the Camaro from a relative named Bubba. But later, as they drove, Monty changed his story. He told Philip directly that he had killed somebody. He said he got $75 from the killing. Philip saw that Monty was shaky and nervous. Then Monty stopped the car along the road. He took out a wallet. The wallet matched the description of Bubba Allen's missing wallet. Monty got rid of the wallet. He threw it away or left it somewhere. He explained to Philip that he had to get rid of some evidence. Later, Philip also saw Monty tear up a check and throw it out the window. Monty said he could not cash that check. Monty kept driving. He had Bubba's Camaro. He had the sawed-off shotgun inside the car. He had Bubba's wife's photo in his own wallet. He had a copy of the newspaper ad. He had told another person that he killed someone. He had disposed of the wallet and the check. He was now on the road to Louisiana. On the same day Bubba Allen's body was found, local law enforcement officers arrived at the ditch near Palestine, Texas. They saw the body and the wound. They noted that the wallet was missing. They began asking questions. They learned that Bubba had gone to meet someone about test driving his Camaro. They also learned that the Camaro was now gone. 3 days passed. On December 2nd, 1986, police officers in Winfield, Louisiana, located Monty Delk and Philip Johnson. Monty was driving the Chevrolet Camaro that belonged to Gene Allen. When officers stopped the car, they checked the registration. The car was still registered in the name of Gene Allen, too. Monty lied to the police. He told them he had borrowed the car from his sister. The police searched the car. Inside, they found the sawed-off shotgun. Later, forensic testing showed that this shotgun was consistent with the weapon that had killed Bubba Allen. They also found an army jacket. Then they searched Monty's wallet. Inside his wallet, police found a photograph of Sheila Allen. That photograph had come from Bubba's missing wallet. They also found a copy of the newspaper ad from the Houston County Courier that listed the Camaro for sale. Monty had kept these items as souvenirs. Police arrested Monty Delk on the spot. They also arrested Philip Johnson, but Johnson was not charged with the murder. At the police station, Monty threatened to kill Philip Johnson if Johnson said anything. But Johnson chose to cooperate with the police. He told them everything. He said that Monty had admitted to killing somebody. He said Monty had gotten $75. He said Monty had disposed of a wallet and torn up a check. Johnson agreed to testify against Monty in court. On January 15, 1987, a grand jury indicted Monty Allen Delk for capital murder. The charge was that he intentionally murdered Gene Olin Allen, too, during the course of committing a robbery. Taking the wallet and the car made it a robbery. Under Texas law, murder during a robbery is capital murder, which can carry the death penalty. The trial began in early May 1988. The jury heard all the evidence. Sheila Allen testified that she had spoken to Monty on the phone. She identified him. Her sister also testified. The woman who saw the Camaro driving without Bubba testified. The neighbor who heard the gunshot at 1 p.m. testified. Philip Johnson testified that Monty confessed to the killing and disposed of evidence. Police officers showed the sawed-off shotgun and the photo of Sheila found in Monty's wallet. The jury also heard from Monty's estranged wife, Tina. She told the jury about Monty's plans to rob and kill people. She described how he beat her. She described how he looked through newspaper ads to find victims. On May 6, 1988, the jury found Monty Delk guilty of capital murder. 3 days later, on May 9, 1988, the same jury heard more evidence about whether Monty should get life in prison or the death penalty. The jury answered the required legal questions in a way that led to a death sentence. The judge sentenced Monty Delk to death by lethal injection. Monty appealed his case. On April 21, 1993, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his conviction and sentence. On November 15, 1993, the United States Supreme Court refused to hear his appeal. He then filed other requests for relief in state and federal courts over the next several years. All of them were denied. While Monty waited on death row in Texas, his behavior became very strange. Prison officials reported that he refused to remove his coveralls to shower. He did not use soap. His body odor became so offensive that officials had to separate him from other inmates. The other inmates became sick from the smell. Monty also made wild claims. He said he was over 129 years old. He said he had been a district judge and a submarine commander. He said he was the president of Kenya. He said he had been killed 150 times while in prison. He also smeared himself with his own feces. Psychiatrists for the prison first diagnosed Monty with bipolar disorder. But in 1994, they changed the diagnosis. They said Monty was malingering to avoid the death penalty. That means they believed he was faking mental illness on purpose so that the state would not execute him. In 1997, a state district judge held a hearing. Monty acted strangely in court. He made disjointed comments. He interrupted a witness. The judge had him gagged and removed from the courtroom. The judge ruled that Monty was voluntarily choosing not to help his own lawyer. That meant the judge did not believe Monty was truly insane. Monty's lawyer, John Wright, fought to stop the execution. He argued that Monty was incompetent to be executed. Under a 1986 U.S. Supreme Court ruling, a prisoner cannot be executed if he does not understand that he is being executed or why. But prosecutors argued that Monty was faking. They pointed out that he had been coherent at his trial. They said he was clever and manipulative. The former Anderson County Sheriff, Gary Thomas, testified that Monty memorized car models and license plates of jail employees. He memorized the names of their wives and children. He used that information to threaten them. Thomas said Monty constantly chipped away at the blocks in his cell, so the jail had to line the cell with welded steel plates. On February 27, 2002, one day before his scheduled execution, a federal judge granted a last-minute stay. The judge said Monty's mental condition needed to be examined further, but the Texas Attorney General immediately appealed that ruling. On February 28, 2002, around 2 p.m., the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the state. The stay was lifted. Prison officials quickly moved Monty from death row to the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas, where executions are carried out. Monty's lawyer appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. At 7:05 p.m., the Supreme Court denied the request for a stay. Monty declined a last meal. At 7:35 p.m., he was strapped to the gurney and wheeled into the death chamber. The warden asked if he had a final statement. Monty screamed profanities and gibberish. He shouted, "I am the warden. Get your warden off this gurney and shut up." He then said, "You are not in America. This is the island of Barbados. People will see you doing this." Then he stopped speaking. His mouth and eyes froze wide open. At 7:47 p.m., the lethal injection began. Monty Allen Delk was pronounced dead at 7:53 p.m. on February 28, 2002. He was 35 years old. His execution was the 761st in the United States since 1976, and the 261st in Texas since that year. Bubba Allen's family waited 15 years for justice. Philip Johnson was not charged with the murder because he cooperated with the prosecution. Monty Delk never showed remorse for killing a 22-year-old man who had only wanted to sell his car. The story of Monty Allen Delk ends with his death by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas, on the night of February 28, 2002. Story 6. Jeffrey Lane Tokar was born on September 29, 1964. His mother was Doreen Smith. His father was Louis Tokar. Jeffrey had an older brother named Louis Tokar Jr. Jeffrey's parents did not stay together for long. His father was an alcoholic. He was also abusive. Doreen divorced Louis Tokar when Jeffrey was still a baby. After the divorce, Doreen married a man named Don Kirshner. Don Kirshner was also an alcoholic. That marriage did not last either. Then Doreen married a man named Sam Cooper. She had another child with Sam Cooper. Sam Cooper treated Jeffrey and his older brother as second-class members of the family. Doreen later divorced Sam Cooper as well. In total, Doreen married several more times after that. Jeffrey grew up with many changes in his home life. Because his mother moved from one marriage to another, Jeffrey moved often. He started kindergarten late in the Waynesville School District on September 26, 1969. He only attended 51 days of school that year. There are no school records for his first grade or second grade years. When he started third grade in Waynesville again, he enrolled late and only attended 124 days that year. Jeffrey went to at least 3 different high schools. He never had a stable anchor to one town or school system. When Jeffrey was young, he lived with different family members at different times. He lived with his maternal grandparents. He lived with his aunt. He also lived with his father for a while. When Jeffrey was about 13 or 14 years old, he went to live with his father. His father was a heavy drinker. Around that same age, Jeffrey had his first taste of alcohol. He began drinking regularly. When he was not drinking, he was shy, quiet, and withdrawn. When he had been drinking, he became more outgoing, talkative, and aggressive. Jeffrey's father later died of cancer while Jeffrey was still in high school. Not long before his father died, Jeffrey's older brother Louis Jr. was in a serious car accident. Louis Jr. had been drinking before the accident. He suffered a severe head injury that left him disabled. Jeffrey helped his mother take care of his brother. Often Jeffrey was left alone to do this. As a young adult, Jeffrey showed signs of fear and suspicion. He often told his mother and his aunt that he felt someone was trying to hurt him. One time he was so scared that someone would come to their home to hurt him that he placed knives in a circle on the floor around himself. He did this so he could defend himself from any direction. Jeffrey received a monetary settlement of $30,000 after he was in a bus accident. He shared part of the money with his father. After his father died, Jeffrey spent the rest of the money on drinking. Jeffrey had several arrests as a young man. On February 12, 1983, he was arrested for assault with minor injury. He was ordered to pay 75 plus court costs. On July 28, 1983, Hueser arrested for driving while intoxicated in Boone County, Missouri. He wasn't in sed 6 months, but that sentence was suspended and he was placed on probation for 2 years. On the same day, Hueser arrested for blood alcohol content violation and sentenced to 7 days. On July 1, 1985, Hueser arrested for battery and sentenced to 14 days. On June 21, 1987, Hueser arrested for larceny and shoplifting for attempts under 75 plus court costs. On July 28, 1983, Hueser arrested for driving while intoxicated in Boone County, Missouri. He wasn't in sed 6 months, but that sentence was suspended and he was placed on probation for 2 years. On the same day, Hueser arrested for blood alcohol content violation and sentenced to 7 days. On July 1, 1985, Hueser arrested for battery and sentenced to 14 days. On June 21, 1987, Hueser arrested for larceny and shoplifting for attempts under 50. He was sentenced to 30 days in jail, fined $125, and ordered to pay court costs. On February 14, 1989, Hueser arrested for damage to property and fined $125, and ordered to pay court costs. On February 14, 1989, Hueser arrested for damage to property and fined $300. On May 23, 1989, Jeffrey was arrested in Boone County for driving while intoxicated and stealing without consent. He was sentenced to 3 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections on each charge, with the sentences to run at the same time. On November 4, 1991, he was sentenced to 2 concurrent 7-year sentences from Boone County for 2 counts of receiving stolen property over $150. Jeffrey also had jobs during this time. He worked at the Madison Convalescent Center in the dietary department from April 1985 through May 1985. His supervisor said he got along well with residents and staff. He also worked at Columbia Regional Hospital in the dietary department. On June 12, 1988, he was written up at work. He complained of back pain and admitted to using morphine tablets regularly. Staff noted he was unsteady on his feet, and his eyes did not focus. He was found under the influence at work again on July 28, 1988, and on November 19, 1988. On August 8, 1988, Jeffrey voluntarily admitted himself to a mental health facility for alcohol treatment. His employer had told him to get treatment or he would lose his job. He was diagnosed with severe alcohol dependence. He completed a 4-week inpatient treatment program successfully. But the day after he was released on September 6, 1988, he started drinking again. He drank 12 beers a day. On February 12, 1989, Jeffrey went to a hospital emergency room for alcohol use. He had drunk a fifth of schnapps and 3 to 6 beers in the last 24 hours. He threatened to kill himself. He was voluntarily admitted to a mental health facility again. His mother told staff that she wanted him to quit drinking or else he would die. Jeffrey himself said that if he could not quit, there was no reason to live. On April 6, 1993, a psychiatrist named Dr. A. E. Daniel evaluated Jeffrey. Dr. Daniel wrote that Jeffrey was suspicious and guarded. Jeffrey said, "I do not trust anybody." Dr. Daniel concluded that Jeffrey had severe paranoia that was close to delusions. Dr. Daniel also noted that Jeffrey had a marked regard for his mother. Jeffrey told Dr. Daniel that the only valid relationship in his life was with his mother. Despite his problems with alcohol and paranoia, family and friends saw another side of Jeffrey. His first cousin Melody Harris said that when he was not drinking, he was shy and quiet. His older brother Louis Jr., who had the head injury, said that Jeffrey encouraged him to keep living and to go on. A family friend named Carrie Haddon said Jeffrey was a very considerate person who called his mother and gave her gifts. People who worked with Jeffrey at the Madison Convalescent Center said he went out of his way to help others and that he was like one of the family. At the time of his arrest on later charges, Jeffrey was classified by the Missouri Department of Corrections as a Level 1 inmate. That was the least restrictive custody level. He was also classified as a high sigma personality, which meant he had personality traits of someone who was naive, gullible, and likely to be victimized by other inmates. But before any of that happened, Jeffrey was still living his life in the community, moving from job to job, drinking heavily, and getting arrested for nonviolent crimes. His paranoia grew worse over time. He did not trust people. He believed others were trying to hurt him, and he continued to drink, which made his paranoia even worse. On the morning of March 11, 1992, Jeffrey Tokar was living in the community. He had already been in and out of jail for past offenses, but he was not in custody at this time. Earlier in the day, Jeffrey picked up his girlfriend. Her name was Sandra Stickley. When Sandra got into the car with Jeffrey, she smoked crack cocaine. Then Jeffrey and Sandra shared some beer together. After they drank, Jeffrey told Sandra they were going to go driving. They drove to a rural area north of Centralia, Missouri. Jeffrey had a specific goal. He wanted to find a house where nobody was home. He was looking for an empty house so he could go inside and steal things. Sandra went along with this plan. As they drove on the rural roads, they saw a house. It was the home of a man named Johnny Douglas. Johnny was married to a woman named Tammy Douglas. They had 2 children. Their son Jared was 8 years old. Their daughter Lindsay was 4 years old. At that time of day, around noon, no one appeared to be at the house. Jeffrey decided this was the house he wanted. Jeffrey pulled his car into the driveway of the Douglas home. He parked there. Then he took his socks off. He placed the socks over his hands. He did this because he did not want to leave his fingerprints on anything he touched. With the socks on his hands, he got out of the car and went inside the garage of the house. Jeffrey looked around inside the garage. He found a shotgun. It belonged to Johnny Douglas. He also found shells that fit the shotgun. He took the shotgun and the shells. Then he came back out of the garage to where Sandra was waiting in the car. He motioned for her to come inside the house with him. Sandra got out of the car and followed Jeffrey inside. Once they were both inside the Douglas home, Jeffrey and Sandra began taking things that did not belong to them. They went through the house and picked up items they wanted to steal. They found empty pillowcases. They used the pillowcases to stuff the stolen items inside. They put silverware, clothing, cosmetics, and electronic equipment into the pillowcases. While Jeffrey and Sandra were inside the house stealing, Johnny Douglas was not at home. He had taken his 2 children, Jared and Lindsay, to check on cattle. They were on some land down the road from their house. Johnny did not know that anyone had entered his home. Later in the afternoon, Johnny finished checking on the cattle. He drove back toward his house with Jared and Lindsay in the truck. As they got close to the house, Jared told his father that he had seen a yellow station wagon driving toward their home earlier. When they pulled into the driveway, they saw a yellow station wagon parked there. It was Jeffrey's car. Johnny told his children to stay in the truck. He said he would go into the garage to see who was there. He did not want to put his children in danger. Johnny got out of the truck and walked toward the garage. Inside the house, Sandra heard the sound of a vehicle pulling into the driveway. She warned Jeffrey. She told him that someone had come home. Jeffrey reacted by picking up the shotgun he had found in the garage. He loaded the shotgun with shells. Then he moved toward the garage area where Johnny was coming in. Lindsay, the 4-year-old daughter, did not stay in the truck. She decided to follow her father. Before she left the truck, she called her brother Jared a chicken. Then she got out and went toward the garage. Jared eventually also got out of the truck and went to look into the garage. All 3 family members were now in or near the garage. Jeffrey met Johnny Douglas in the garage. Sandra Stickley was in another room of the house, but she could hear what was happening. She heard one of the children say, "Mister, please don't hurt my daddy." Then she heard Johnny Douglas himself plead. Johnny said, "Mister, please don't hurt me. I'll do anything you say." Then Sandra heard Jeffrey Tokar speak to Johnny. Jeffrey told Johnny not to look at him. Johnny obeyed. He did not look at Jeffrey's face. After that, Sandra heard a shot. The shotgun fired. Johnny Douglas was hit in the face. He fell. Then Sandra heard a second shot. Jeffrey fired the shotgun again. This time Johnny was hit in the back of his head. When police later examined the scene, they determined based on blood splatter that Johnny had been bent over or low to the ground when the second shot was fired. Right after the second shot, Jeffrey and Sandra ran out of the house. They got back into Jeffrey's yellow station wagon. They threw the shotgun into the back seat. Jeffrey started the car and drove away quickly. As Jeffrey drove, he wiped down the shotgun with his shirt. He was trying to remove any fingerprints he might have left on the gun. He also took the shell that was still in the gun out of the chamber. He kept driving until he found a farm pond near the road. Then he stopped the car. He got out and threw the shotgun into the pond. He also threw the shell into the pond. The shell floated on top of the water. Later that evening, Jeffrey told Sandra, "Sandy, I did kill this man. I shot half the side of his face off, and then when he started to get back up, I blowed the back of his head off." He also told her, "I should have killed the kids so no one could testify and say that we were there." Meanwhile, back at the Douglas home, 8-year-old Jared had run to a neighbor's house. He was scared. He told the neighbor what had happened. The neighbor called 911. The neighbor also took Jared and Lindsay to their grandparents' house to keep them safe. When the police arrived at the Douglas home, they found Johnny Douglas lying in a pool of blood on the garage floor. He was dead. The police saw that items had been piled on a table. They saw pillowcases stuffed with silverware, clothing, and cosmetics. They found a box of .410 shotgun shells, but they did not find the shotgun that belonged to Johnny. That shotgun was gone. The police also found a bloody shoe imprint on the floor. That imprint would later be compared to shoes that Jeffrey Tokar was wearing when he was arrested. The imprint was consistent with Jeffrey's shoes, though not a perfect match. At that point, the police did not yet know who had committed the crime. They had 2 young children who had seen part of what happened. They had a description of a yellow station wagon, but they did not have a name. The investigation had only just begun. After the police found Johnny Douglas dead in his garage, they began looking for the person who killed him. They knew from the children that a yellow station wagon had been in the driveway. They also knew that 2 people had been inside the house. The children had seen some of what happened, but they were very young. Jared was 8 years old. Lindsay was only 4. The police needed more evidence. 2 days passed. On March 13, 1992, the police arrested Jeffrey Tokar. They also arrested Sandra Stickley. The arrest took place at the home of Jeffrey's grandmother. At first, Sandra Stickley told the police that she did not know anything about the burglary or the murder, but later she changed her story. She admitted that she had been with Jeffrey when the crime happened. She told the police that Jeffrey had confessed to her that he shot Johnny Douglas. She also told the police where Jeffrey had thrown the shotgun. Following Sandra's information, the police searched the farm pond. They found the shotgun at the bottom of the pond. They also found the shell floating on the water. The shotgun belonged to Johnny Douglas. The shell matched the box of shells found inside the house. These were important pieces of physical evidence. The police also conducted a lineup. In a lineup, a witness looks at several people to see if they can identify the person who committed the crime. 3 different people identified Jeffrey Tokar from the lineup. One of those people was 8-year-old Jared Douglas. Jared pointed to Jeffrey and said he was the man who shot his father. After the arrest and identification, the state of Missouri charged Jeffrey Tokar with first-degree murder. Sandra Stickley made a deal with the prosecutors. She agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. In exchange for her guilty plea and her cooperation in testifying against Jeffrey, she received a sentence of 20 years in prison. Jeffrey Tokar went to trial on May 3, 1993. The trial was moved to Warren County because the crime happened in Audrain County. The judge wanted to make sure Jeffrey could get a fair trial away from the local community where the murder occurred. The trial lasted 5 days. The jury heard testimony from Sandra Stickley. They heard from the children. They saw the physical evidence, including the shotgun and the shell. They saw the bloody shoe imprint evidence. Jeffrey Tokar chose not to testify. He did not take the witness stand during the guilt phase of the trial. The judge asked Jeffrey questions to make sure he understood his decision. Jeffrey answered the judge's questions in a reasonable way. He did not show any sign that he did not understand what was happening. At the end of the 5 days, the jury found Jeffrey Tokar guilty of first-degree murder. The trial then moved to the penalty phase. During this phase, the jury had to decide whether Jeffrey should receive the death penalty or life in prison. The jury found 2 reasons why the death penalty was justified. First, the murder was outrageously vile, horrible, and inhuman because it involved depravity of mind. Second, the murder was committed while Jeffrey was engaged in a burglary. The jury recommended the death penalty. On August 27, 1993, the trial judge agreed with the jury's recommendation. The judge sentenced Jeffrey Tokar to death. After the sentence, Jeffrey's lawyers filed appeals. On March 26, 1996, the Missouri Supreme Court affirmed Jeffrey's conviction and death sentence. On October 15, 1996, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear Jeffrey's case. Jeffrey then filed a habeas corpus petition in federal court. On March 19, 1998, the U.S. District Court denied his petition. He appealed to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. On December 8, 1999, the Eighth Circuit also denied his request. On October 2, 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court again declined to hear his case. On February 4, 2002, the Missouri Supreme Court set an execution date. Jeffrey Tokar was scheduled to die on March 6, 2002. His lawyers asked Governor Bob Holden for clemency. They asked the governor to change the death sentence to life in prison without parole. They argued that Jeffrey had paranoid personality disorder and that he was a severe alcoholic. They said he was not dangerous and that he had shown compassion for others. Governor Holden reviewed the request. On the night of March 5, 2002, Governor Holden denied clemency. He said he found nothing that warranted changing the jury's original verdict. On March 6, 2002, just after midnight, Jeffrey Tokar was executed by lethal injection at the Potosi Correctional Center in Mineral Point, Missouri. Prison spokesman John Fauger said the execution began at 12:01 a.m. 3 minutes after the first of 3 injections was given, Jeffrey lost consciousness. He died at 12:04 a.m. Witnesses said Jeffrey appeared to be singing until he lost consciousness. He had prepared a final statement. In that statement, he said, "A dying man should always tell the truth, and the truth isn't necessarily what a person hears, but what they choose to believe. Praise the Lord, I am on my way." The 2 children who witnessed their father's murder, Jared and Lindsay, were not allowed to see the execution because Missouri law prohibited anyone under 21 from witnessing an execution. The Audrain County Sheriff who investigated the murder, Stuart Miller, attended the execution. He said he felt an obligation to the family. After the execution, Jeffrey's body was taken away. Sandra Stickley remained in prison serving her 20-year sentence. The Douglas children grew up without their father. The case was closed, and Jeffrey Lane Tokar became the 56th person executed in Missouri since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976.